What is going on, guys? Rogue TCG here, bringing the yugioh TCG deck profile. Now, you all voted for it, so I am very happy to be bringing it to you. Here is Dark World. Now, a lot of people have very mixed opinions about this deck. A lot of people don't like how the deck plays, just because it basically plays in a way where it makes your opponent not really have too much fun. But also, it's kind of like a solitaire deck where, if left uninterrupted, pretty much your opponent's going to lose. And if they interrupt you once, you're probably going to lose. But with this deck, I'm trying to make it as competitive as possible, so it is going to be a little bit pricier than some of the other decks I may be showing you. It's about $162, so it's not necessarily too expensive, but it's also not necessarily budget. But this deck basically revolves around the Dark Worlds, which are all monsters that gain different effects based on if you discarded them for card effect, and then will gain bonus effects if that was the card effect that your opponent made them do, if that makes sense. So if your opponent makes you discard a card for card effect, then you are going to be able to get a bonus effect with all the Dark Worlds. And a lot of them are worded like absolute dog shit, so please forgive me if I fumble a little bit in my reading. But that's enough yapping. Let's get into the profile. Starting off, we're on 3 of the new Big Daddy. We are on 3 Rainbow Overking of the Dark World. It is a Fiend. You can special summon this card from your graveyard by returning a level 7 or lower Dark World monster you control to your hand. That is not a once per turn. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add a 1 level 5 or higher Dark World monster from your deck to your hand, except for Rainbow Overking of the Dark World. Then if it was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon 1 level 4 or lower Dark World monster from your deck or graveyard to either field. Now, that either field effect is quite important, and it can facilitate some really nasty stuff we can do with Silva, but we are also able to play Triple Tactics Thrust, because very frequently a lot of our cards are going to give themselves to our opponents to make us discard a card from our opponent's side of the field, which will both give us the bonus effects as well as, give them a monster that they're controlling and a monster effect that they activated, or rather that activate on their side of the field for a Triple Tactics Thrust, or even a Triple Tactics Talons. So that's one of the main backbone identities of the deck right now is Thrust and Talons being able to be used even if they don't even hand trap you. So even if they don't interact with you, these cards are going to be online. Next up, we're on Double Grapha Dragonlord of the Dark World. This one's the OG Daddy. You can special summon this card from your graveyard by bouncing a Dark World monster you control to the hand, except for Grapha Lord of the Dark World. Now, unlike the Rainbow, where it needs to be a level specific one, Grapha can bounce anything. So what we can do is if we have 2 Graphas in rotation, we can have one on field, bounce one, yeah. Oh, sorry. My apologies. We can't bounce Grapha, but if we bounce something like a Silva, we can bounce the Rainbow to our field and then bounce the Rainbow with the Grapha. I had it in the wrong order. My apologies. But Grapha also reads, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, target a card your opponent controls, destroy that target. And if it was discarded to the hand to the graveyard by opponent's card effect, we can rip a random card out of our opponent's hand. Rather, we get to look at one random card, and then if it was a monster, we can special it. It still is ripping a card out of their hand, but it is random, and it has to be a monster. So it's kind of like gambling, but that's basically all Yu-Gi-Oh is. You draw 5 random cards, you're gambling at that point, baby. But that's it for our Grapha and Rainbow. Now for our other big man, we're on 1 Silva Warlord of the Dark World. I can see you maybe wanting to play 2 or even 3 of this card, depending on how all in you want to be on the Silva game plan. But I'm trying to spec the deck into being able to do the Silva thing, but also being able to just play without it. You know what I mean? We don't want to have to rely on this type of interaction too much, because it also will piss off our opponent to the highest degree. But Silva reads, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon this card, and if it was discarded to your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, your opponent also places exactly 2 cards from their hand on the bottom of the deck in any order. So we're hand ripping them by 2. So what this means is we can only really do this twice during our first turn, which means we're going to leave our opponent on 1 card. However, leaving our opponent on 1 card and then drawing a second card, if we have an end board that's basically anything, they're probably not going to be able to get through it. So you can see why a lot of people have a lot of frustration with this deck. You could play more than that if you wanted to, but this card is quite searchable, and we can fetch it however which way we'd like to. So we are playing 1 copy of Silva, and because of the Grapha being able to bounce it and the Rainbow being able to bounce it, we can keep discarding it, so it's not a huge deal, because it does special summon itself from the graveyard, as well as ripping 2 cards. So, yeah. We're on Triple Snow Unlight of the Dark World. If it's discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, and if it was discarded to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, so this one's our card effect, we can target 1 monster in our opponent's graveyard to add a Ugh. Yeah, you see what I mean? How these are worded like shit? I'm just gonna read it, the card, the text I see on my screen. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, colon, if it was discarded to the graveyard to the hand to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect, comma, you can target one monster in your opponent's graveyard, semicolon, add one Dark World card from your deck to your hand, comma, then special summon that target, if any, in defense position. So, what does this card do? If it's discarded just generally for a card effect, we get to add a Dark World monster from our deck to our hand. If it was an opponent's card effect that discarded Snow, we also get to target a monster in our opponent's graveyard and special summon it to our field in defense position. That's all it does. Like, it'll always get us a search. It might get us a reborn. It's phrased like absolute dog shit, but that's what it does. You saw how I was struggling to read this fucking card. So, yeah. We're playing 3 of it because it is a searcher that triggers when it's discarded. Also, not once per turn. So, yeah. We're on triple Genta, Gateman of the Dark World. This one's a new one. We can only special it once per turn, so we're only going to get an extendee off of this guy once. We can discard this card to the graveyard to add one Gates of the Dark World from our deck to our hand, and if this card is banished and we control a Dark World card, we can special summon this card. That's going to make a lot more sense once we cover Gates of the Dark World, so let's actually cover that right now. We're on triple Gates of the Dark World. All fiends, in general, gain 300 attack and defense. Once per turn, we can banish a fiend from our graveyard, discard a fiend, and then draw a card. Now, discarding the fiend is an effect. Drawing a card is also part of the effect. And you'll notice how this is a Dark World card that banishes a fiend from our graveyard. So this will, Genta is like, the one card combo. Because we discard Genta, we add Gates of the Dark World. We go Gates of the Dark World to banish the Genta, discard another, like, Dark World or something, draw a card. Genta is going to trigger when it's banished because we have a Dark World card face up on the field, and it's going to special summon itself. So we can only do that once per turn, but it's still a fantastic resource loop. And that's why we're playing 3 Genta and 3 Gates of the Dark World, because Gates of the Dark World is not a once per turn, and neither is Genta's effect to search Gates of the Dark World. We're on triple Brow, Huntsman of the Dark World. If it's discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, draw a card, or if it's your opponent's card effect, draw 2. Great card. This is just, getting us our advantage that we lose by discarding cards, by just drawing us a card instead, just replacing the card in hand. And if we want to draw even more and we can set up our opponent discarding one of our cards, we can discard this to draw 2. Although we could just do the same thing with Tactics. So, it's just copies of Tactics 2, 3, and 4, except these ones aren't once per turns. Run 1 Ceruli, Guru of the Dark World. Very similar situation to Silva, where you can play around with the ratios if you so choose. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, special summon this card to your opponent's field defense position. And if it's special summoned by the effect of a Dark World card, our opponent discards 1 card. Now keep in mind that this is going to be special summoned to our opponent's side of the field, so they'll get that effect, and this is one of the ways we are able to basically get our opponent to make us discard a card. And since it's a Dark World, it's incredibly searchable, and this is even a card that we can special summon from our deck with Rainbow over King of the Dark World, and since it is a Dark World card, it will trigger the Cerule's effect. But that's it for our main deck Dark World monsters. Now let's get onto our honorary Dark Worlds. We're on triple Gen and 1 Ken, the Diamond Tiger and Warrior Dragon respectively. Diamond Tiger says if it is normal summoned, we can special summon a Ken the Dragon from our hand or deck to our opponent's field in defense position. And if this card is special summoned by effective Ken, whoever has it discards a card. And then Ken reads, when it's summoned, we can summon Gen. And if this card is special summoned by effective Gen, your opponent draws 2 cards and then they discard 1 card. So basically what this is doing is we're going to be normal summoning our Gen, and Ken is going to be special summoned to our opponent's side of the field. It's going to automatically activate, and it's going to make us draw 2 cards and then discard 1 card. And since we're discarding for card effect and it's our opponent's monster, we're going to be able to get the bonus effects of our Dark Worlds, plus we're going card neutral, I believe, because we wasted 1 card of our hand for the normal summon of our Gen, and then we're losing a card off of the draw, so we're drawing 2, so we're replacing the 2 cards that we used. Other cards that we can use, I'm playing 2 copies of Salamander Catalyzer. You can reveal this card and a fiend in our hand, special summon one of them, and discard the other. So that is going to be discarding 4 card effect. When a monster is destroyed by battle with involving a fiend monster while this card's in your graveyard, you can add this card to your hand. You can use each effect of Catalyzer once per turn. It's just a good extender. It's always going to be special summoning itself and discarding a Dark World, and the Dark World's going to get its bonus effect, so huge W's there. I already mentioned the Gates of the Dark World. We're also on one copy of Dark Corridor, able to add a Dark World monster from our deck to our hand, then making us pitch a card for card effect. I mean, that's a hard once per turn on that, and that's the reason we're playing only one copy of this, because we can search this with Thrust. We're also on one copy of Dark World Accession. This is a card that we can search with Snow because it is a Dark World. And then it reads, it's a quick effect, during the main phase, fusion summon one Fiend fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing materials mentioned from the field or graveyard. If fusion summoning a Dark World monster this way, you can discard monsters as material. During the main phase of this card's in our graveyard, we can add this card to our hand, then discard a Dark World monster, and we can use each effective Dark World Accession once per turn. Now, this card's interesting in this deck for a variety of reasons. It discards from our hand, so it triggers our Dark Worlds on our opponent's turn if we choose to do it on our opponent's turn because it's a quick effect. It can fusion summon any Fiend fusion monster, so we are, in theory, able to summon. You can see it in here. I'm not gonna hide it. We can in theory summon our Fiendsmith Desiree with this, which is very cute and funny, and our opponent might not expect it. And if our opponent isn't expecting it, maybe it might be good, but we're not gonna be able to get any equips on it, so that's the unfortunate part about it being a quick effect. So most of the time, it's pretty much only going to be used to summon Graphit and Clurless, the Chaos King of the Dark World. It's still a good enough card, but we're going to be playing it, and so we're playing it at 1 as a searchable target in order to improve our board. I already mentioned Thrust, and we are on triple Thrust and 1 Tactics. We're also on 1 Call by the Grave. This deck has a very serious issue to hand traps, specifically Droll and Lockbird, like exactly, and I guess technically D-Shifter, but Droll and Lockbird's a lot worse since we need to be refilling our hand in order to keep using our Dark World stuff, so we are playing what we can in order to mitigate Droll and Lockbird, although in reality there isn't really too much that we can do to stop it, other than playing like something like Kwakimiru Guardian or something like that, something that we have to be giving up other cards that we want to be normal summoning in order to do. We are on a Fiendsmith engine because the Fiendsmith cards actually synergize quite nicely with the Dark Worlds. We're on 1 Engraver, 1 Lacrima, and 1 Fabled Lurry because we actually do want to be using that discard synergy in order to get that Lurry on our side of the field to basically make the Fiendsmith combo easier. And we're on triple copies of Fiendsmith Tracked. A lot of decks that are splashing Fiendsmith do not even play Tracked anymore, and yet we are playing 3 copies of it. And that's because we can add a Light Fiend from our deck to our hand, then discard a card for card effect, which will trigger all of our Dark Worlds, funny enough. So we are playing this because we actually do want to be opening this, because we can even add something like a Fabled Lurry, and then we can discard a Dark World. So, no harm, no foul, and we can discard that Lurry later in the turn. And lastly, since we are a Fiend deck, I am opting to play our Unchained engine, 1 copy of Unchained Soul of Sharbara, and 1 copy of Abominable Chamber of the Unchained. That's it for our main deck, a nice solid 40 cards. Now let us cover our extra. I don't mean to interrupt the video, but I do just want to give you all guys a heads up. We are quickly rising in our subscriber number, and I did want to make you all aware that once we hit 2,000 subscribers, I am going to be doing another giveaway. Now, I remember I did one once we hit 500 subscribers, and we did a special thing for 1,000, so I want to do something special for 2,000, and you see this beautiful mat right here? Well, it can be yours. I have 2 extra mats. There's one of them, and let me get that second one for y'all. I have 2 extra pristine mats for you all. So I got multiple of these, and to 2 lucky winners, I'm going to be giving 1 to one person and 1 to another. And the person who wins the overall giveaway is also going to get a full Orcust deck. I can't guarantee it's going to be max rarity, but I'm going to see what I can do, and I'm going to try and make it look nice and pretty for you. It's not going to be the full deck. It's just going to be the core Orcust cards, but I want to be able to give you one of you all the ability to play one of my favorite decks. So just something I'm doing for you. You can always pop into our Discord. I believe that's where I'm going to be doing the giveaway. The Discord's always going to be in the description of my videos. I'm going to have a little bit more details once we start rolling up on that, but I just wanted to make you all aware of that. Now, back to the video. I did mention that we do have a lot of cards that give themselves to our opponents. Namely, our Rainbow can give cards to our opponents, as well as Cerulli will pretty much always give himself to our opponent. So we are playing a card in order to, reap the rewards of that. We are playing 1 copy of Akashic Magician, able to, if we choose the zones our card is being given to our opponent in, we can bounce those cards back to our hand in order to discard them again, because, of course, Cerulli isn't a once per turn, so we can just, do it again, why not? So, very cute little thing that we can do there. We're also on one copy of Muckracker from the Underworld. This card is incredibly powerful in this deck because, again, it discards for card effects, it protects our fiends. One neat thing is it does fiend lock us, and that might seem like the worst thing that we could be saying, because this deck kind of wants to be making generic stuff that most people typically think about this deck with. However, in this deck, we are playing Skuldred and Zelantis, so we can do the Marincess thing where we lock ourselves into a certain thing, Muckracker being Fiend, and we can make Zelantis and banish the whole field, and since we're the ones summoning the monsters back, we can't summon anything except for Fiends, and if our opponent isn't playing a Fiend deck, they ain't getting their cards back ever, which is incredibly adorable. So that's why we're playing it. It's probably not the best thing in the world, and there's probably something you can be doing better than playing Zelantis, but I'm opting to play Zelantis just for that cute little combo with Muckracker. Again, we're on Unchained, so we're on one Yama and one Soul of Rage. It really able to amplify the power of our end board even when we're interacted with, as well as the one SP Little Knight in order to pair with that Unchained Soul of Rage. We're on one Saruya Skuldred. We really want to be seeing specific cards in this deck, and this deck can make a lot of link material, so Saruya is incredibly powerful. Exactly in this deck, it'd be even more powerful if we were playing the World variant, but we aren't. But, you know, it's still really strong, so take it that how you will. And then we are on one, last of our generic cards really. We're on one copy of Dugaris the Timeless. We can make this. We're playing enough 4s. Again, we're playing Snow, we're playing Genta. Those are our 4s, but you know, Genta summons itself and Snow can be summoned, so it's not something that we're theoretically out of the realm of possibility of doing, as well as Lacrima of the Crimson Tears is also a level 4. So we're able to make this, and this card also let us draw 2 and discard 1, and the discard is for card effect. We are playing the Fiendsmiths in here. This is going to be something that we can do if we get interacted with to a degree where we can't really do anything and we just have material left on board. We're on one Moon of the Closed Heaven, one Fiendsmith Requiem, and one Fiendsmith Sequence. This card is quite good in this deck because it can fusion any Fiend fusion, again, using our graveyard. So our targets are going to be Fiendsmith Desiree, one copy of Chloralus, and one copy of Grapha. And I'm going to cover Chloralus and Grapha in just a moment. Speaking of covering Chloralus and Grapha, here is Chloralus, Chaos King of the Dark World. It needs specifically Rainbow Overlord of the Dark World and 2+ Fiend monsters. If this card is fusion summoned, you can destroy all of the cards your opponent controls. This card's original attack and defense become the number of materials used for its summon times 1,000. Once per turn quick effect, we can target one face-up card we control, discard a card, and it's untargetable for the rest of the turn. The untargetable effect, not really that great. It is our discard outlet that we can use for our Dark Worlds, although it's not really the best. The main reason we're playing this is because this is just a board wipe on summon, and it just needs 3 monsters to make, and if we make it with 3 monsters, it's 3k. So that's why we're playing it. This is kind of like our finisher button. It's, I guess the closest thing we can really compare it to is Divine Arsenal AA Zeus. So there's that kind of comparison, and that's why we're playing it. And then our main thing that we want to be making on our turn 1 being Grapha, Dragon Overlord of the Dark World. When our opponent activates a monster effect or a normal spell / trap card while you have a card in our hand, quick effect, we can activate this effect. It changes the effect of the card our opponent activates to make it so that card effect now reads we have to discard a card. And we can only use this effect of Grapha once per turn, and if this fusion summoned card in its owner's control leaves the field as an opponent's card, we can special summon one of our Grapha Dragon Lords of the Dark World that's banished on our graveyard. Then each player with a hand discards 1. Very strange wording on that card. It does get back the main card that we're going to be using, being Grapha, because that is the main material on this card. But the main reason we're playing this is because it's technically a negate. We're picking the card that we don't want to resolve the absolute most and changing it so the only thing it does is give us advantage. So that's why we're playing it. And then our last card in the deck is one copy of Chaos Angel. We are playing a lot of dark level 4s and we are playing light level 6s, so this is a card that just naturally slots in fairly well into this deck, and so we are playing it. In the side deck are just cards I would like to discuss before I end off the video. Being, if we're going second, a really powerful card is Lava Golem that we can also pair with our Akashic Magician, and as well as one copy of Eradicator Epidemic Virus, which is a triple tactics thrust target for when we're going first, since if we contribute a dark monster with 2500 or more attack, declare a spell or a trap, and our opponent has to discard all spells and traps that they draw until the end of their 3rd turn after it resolves, and all spell and traps they currently control or on in their hand. So, very powerful card. when we're going first. A lot of people hate this card. I hate this card. It's, a very unfortunate card, but it is what it is. And since it's searchable thrust, we're basically playing 4 copies of it in our deck that draws a lot of cards, as well as our rainbow and our grapha and our big grapha and our, we have a lot of targets. We have a lot of different ways to get this guy online. Our Clurless. All of those cards are cards that we contribute with our Eradicator Epidemic Virus to make our opponent's life a living hell. I mean, isn't that the point of the deck? But that's going to be about it for the deck profile. Thank you all for watching, if you still are. Thank you to my one member. Thank you, Ari. If you want to become a member, I would recommend staying around to the end of the video in order to find out more about that. But that's going to be about it for the video. Again, thank you all so much for watching, if you still are. And I'll be seeing you all later. Bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh and the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or 2 before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.